In a day when so many marriages end up in divorce so soon, it almost sounds unimaginable. Married 40 years or more. My guest today set out to discover the secrets to long-lasting marriages. They took a 12,000-mile road trip across the country in an RV and talked to more than 200 couples to find out how they made their marriages last 40, 50, or 60 years or more. Mathew, Boggs, and Jason Miller are here. They're authors of Project Everlasting. Great to have you guys here today.
You too, Greg.
Thanks a lot. Can I stretch over there?
My parents have been married about 40-some years, I think 43. Sorry, Mom and Dad, if I didn't get that right.
Nice.
Yeah, which, again, to me, seems like it's unimaginable these days. I mean, what, people get divorced, and, well, you have the statistics here. What is that? I mean, half the marriages end up in divorce, and how long? I mean,
yeah.
So
typically, if they do fail, they'll fail within 8 years.
8
so
years.
something's hitting people right when they get into marriage that they didn't expect.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think our generation is going to have the 40, 50, 60-year marriages.
That's why we wanted to do this.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
Instill some
what are the
faith.
secrets? Let's give us some some help, man, because we need it. For sure.
And that's kind of, what I wondered. So what led two bachelors to write this, to set out to find the secrets of long-lasting marriages, to find...
It was really the image of a long-lasting marriage that inspired me. I come from a divorced background. My parents are divorced. My aunts and uncles are divorced. And I had one set of grandparents that were absolutely crazy in love with each other. And we've all seen that image, the old couple holding the hand and whatever.
And they were married how long?
They were married 63 years.
63 years.
But there was a moment that forever changed the trajectory of my life, and I was spending time with them because my grandfather's health was failing. And we were antiquing. They loved to go to antique shops, and I always hated that part.
Sounds like me, knick-knack shop.
Isn't that odd?
And I'm locking the car door, and they're walking up in front of me, and for whatever reason on this day, I was going through a breakup with my girlfriend, and my heart was raw, and I looked up and I saw them, and I could see the energy between them. I could see how in love they were, and I was like, man, that's what I want to have. How do I get that? And on the drive home, I was like, let's do a book that shows people who grew up like I did that was possible, number one, but then also to discover how they did that for myself so that I could wind up one day old and gray and with my wife.
Yeah, no, and it's fascinating. Maybe because, again, on this show, on the talk shows, we talk a lot to psychologists and coaches and counselors and all kinds of things. So I like the fact, though, that you were going to people who've actually lived through it and survived it, if you will. It wasn't just an expert. I mean, these were people who sometimes average people who lived their lives. And as I was telling you, I said, actually, it's such a good idea. I wish I had thought of it. Because it really is just a very interesting...
Yeah, the stories are rich, and it's funny because most of their principles, they're not big, like, psychoanalyzed principles, to marriage, but it just so happens as we read through, like, the relationship success books of major researchers, they're the same principles when you get down to it. When we're talking about respect, when it comes down to the fundamentals of making a marriage last, it's, we're talking about respect and commitment. And these aren't brand new things or insights into the world. But what's cool for us is, I mean, we've read these books, and it's different to have a couple in mind. When I'm going through stuff in a relationship, to think of a couple who went through a similar situation and remember them as my role model.
And they survived.
It's much more. So it has a much bigger influence on my life than remembering a principle of respect.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's the inspiration piece, really,
Yeah.
I think you bring up a good point, though, because I think you said the same kind of thing in the book, that after you had interviewed so many people and saw some similarities or heard a lot of the same things over and over again, you asked younger generation, I think, like a guy and a man and a woman in a bar, like she was in her 29 or something, he was 50. And you asked them the secrets, and they said a lot of the same things, and you were like, gee, we just did this whole project, and they already knew the answers.
Right.
But I was thinking, though, I think maybe the difference is, though, we say you walk the walk and talk the talk, but you can't walk the walk.
Exactly.
So those people don't just talk the talk, they actually walked the walk and lived it.
Right.
Whereas, we can all say it, but they were able to implement it.
Well, and that's the benefit of interviewing people and sitting down with people who are at the end of their lives, basically. I mean, a lot of them aren't even here with us anymore on this planet, and of course they've failed. They've made mistakes. It's not like they've walked that talk throughout 40 years of marriage plus. They've failed.
These were not perfect marriages by any means.
Exactly. And that's also an important thing for us to see, for both of us actually, to see that, none of these couples were blissful 100% of the time. In fact, you know, some of them, a lot of them wanted out.
Wow.
And,
Even
you know,
now, huh, after the 40, 50, or 60 years.
Absolutely, wanted out, and you know, they went back to their commitment to one another, and
You'd be like, wait, no, that's going to screw up our book. You can't get a divorce. You got to stay together,
exactly.
you know, what would screw up our book even more is if Matt and I got a divorce. You know, I mean.
Yeah, I know. You'll never live that down, by the way.
You read about that. The sunflower seeds?
Yes. Yeah. Well, I mean, but you could never, I mean, people, yeah. You were saying after being on the road so long, you were kind of ready to kill each other, right?
Oh, and that's the funniest part is we sit through these interviews where they tell us the number one key is respect, and they're telling us that over and over and over again. And I miss it. I was like, I thought, oh, that's old hat. I know that already. Respect, yeah. You know, what else do you have? What are your other secrets? Like, give me the real stuff. And they would keep coming back to that. And halfway through the tour, we wanted to kill each other because we couldn't practice what they were talking about. And it was really later it became apparent that they had grown this discipline of respect for one another. Because even when it dawned on me that I wasn't respecting him and vice versa, I would still slip and fall back into criticism or all the ways that we disrespected each other, even when I knew I should be doing it right. And I didn't have the stress that we were under was greater than the discipline of respect I had grown. And so that's what, you know, these couples say, you don't have to get it right, but you just get better each day, you know, and looking at them now, it's tremendous, you know, the amount of respect they show and the beauty, the dance they do in their love with one another.
Now, what was the longest marriage of the people that you talked to?
Oh, that's a funny story, actually. Tell them when you called this. 76 years married.
76
Tell them when you called them.
Years.
Yeah, I called this guy and I said, you know, eventually we had to start qualifying the couples that we interviewed because we quickly learned that 40 years didn't mean 40 happy years together. It didn't mean successful. Like we walked out of some interviews going, man, that is not the kind of marriage I want to have. And so I called this guy. I said, there's two qualifications for interviewing with us. One is that you have to have been married 40 years. You have that one. But the other is that you have to say you're happily married.
So it was happily married,
happily married,
not just long marriages.
Self-prescribed.
Because marriage can be real long.
Right, exactly.
Long.
Right.
So I'm like, sure.
Depends on the day, right?
Yeah, I'm like, so would you say that you're happily married? And this, you know, guy married 76 years. He's like, yeah, I think I've been, let me go ask my wife. And so he goes over, asks his wife, honey, I can hear him in the background, honey, are we happily married? And she's like, yeah, we're happily married. And he comes back, okay, we can interview with you. I was like, that's a smart man, though.
And did you
knows how to
ask
go.
his wife if they're happy? And,
she's the one who gets to say.
And yeah, maybe if he had said he was and then she decided they weren't or something.
And we shot a documentary film about this whole process of going up and around the country. It's actually based, we did a tour before this national tour where we just went up the West Coast for 5 weeks. And and we found, many of these couples were saying, just it depends on the day, Like we said, we asked this one lady, what's the secret to success in a relationship? She's like, well, first of all, I don't know if you're asking the right question. Today, I hate him. Tomorrow, I think he's great.
But see, she knew. She had gone through it. She knew it was up and down.
Yeah, another great quote this lady said, there's no such thing as a perfect marriage. There are only perfect moments in the marriage. So and that was a great for us.
You're kind of getting me back. I was getting worried there for a little bit, but I'm coming back now. So.
Yeah.
We'll be right back with the authors of Project Everlasting. And we are back with Mathew Boggs and Jason Miller, authors of Project Everlasting. So 76 years was the longest. And how many, so the average though, you had a lot of people 40, 50s, 60s, something like that. That was probably okay.
It was cool to see the span of generations because, some of those went through the Great Depression and World War II.
Yeah, so how old were these people that had been married 76 years? I mean, did they get married when they were 10? Or were they 120 years old?
They're like 96, married when they're 20. Yeah. And now they're 96 and whatnot in their 90s.
Now, is that a world's record? Do you know what the world's record is for the longest marriage?
It's somewhere up around 80, 81 right now.
81.
Actually, I don't know what the Guinness Book of World Record is for it, but right now I think the oldest is 81.
I just heard of one 80 years old, 80 years married. Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Crazy, yeah.
I hope it was happy.
Can you imagine?
Because that'd be a real little painful experience if it weren't, let me tell you.
Yeah, and that's what's amazing too, is they have the perspective. You know, everything in my life at this point, being in our 20s, is such a big deal. You know, everything is so huge, and I'll get stressed out, and I'll get worried, and all this stuff. And they, you know, they've been there and they've done that, and they've seen things come, and they've seen things go, and they've made it work. And they're like, you know, most of the stuff, 90% of everything you're worried about won't happen. So don't waste the energy worrying about it, you know? Yeah. And they really bring that great perspective to sit with people who are at the end of their life saying, you know, it could work out.
But these people, again, but they didn't have perfect marriages. They did have their ups and downs. They were very upfront about that. They probably went through it all in the sense that, you know, affairs, financial problems. I mean, they were probably on the verge of divorce at various points.
Everything, yeah. I mean, you know, not every marriage is, you know, you're not supposed to stay in every marriage. All of the counselors will agree out there, you know, if there's addiction or abuse or, you know, adultery, you know, 3 A's, you know, that's not healthy. That's not safe for anybody. So don't feel bad if you're cutting your ties there. But other than that, you know, they said, look, we've been through this. We've been through that bankruptcy, you know, where we lost everything, or we've lost a child. This is the stuff you want to lean on each other for, not separate and go your ways and find someone else that's going to fix that problem.
Well, I liked your comment that, you know, like a friend of mine who's a psychologist said, you know, love, or there are different theories or comments on this, but, you know, people have said there are various stages, and first you have the romantic, you know, the really wild-eyed, crazy, you know, head over heels in love, and then it becomes a more mature kind of, you know, whatever. Yeah. And you always kind of thought, like you kind of even said too, you know, you wonder if you, it's like a nurse, you like you were married the day, you know, is it really that exciting, or you just, maybe you wonder if you really, the other person even loves the other person. But for the first time though, I thought though, when I read your comment though, that, so you had people in that phase who maybe were just kind of going through the motions, or, you know, been married for the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years, might as well stay married tomorrow. But then you said something like, but it came back. I mean, there were people who, they lost it, they were going through the motions, but then they found it again.
Sure, but it's not like Disneyland, you know, it's not like this magic fairy that comes back into your life. You have to make some decisions. You know, love is really a choice when you come down to it. I mean, you have to act lovingly to your mate. It's not like, oh, sometime along the road, you know, my heart will come back and I'll be in love again. It's, you know, you know, a lot of the couples talked about love being a decision to give, to put that other person first, and all the feelings kind of find their way back into your heart, and the relationship will get rejuvenated through that action. Yeah,
and that was, you know, these couples talked a lot about trust as well, and I always thought that meant trust that the other person is going to be faithful to you, you know, or trust that they're going to show up on time, or whatever, that kind of trust. But there was a trust they had in the love that existed between the two of them, that when they didn't feel the rush or the high of the in-love emotion, they trusted that what they had was real. And they said that feeling ebbs and flows. You know, it will go away and it will come back and whatnot, and you can help it come back by being in service and giving. But they trusted that what they had was real, and that it will come back. It was cool.
Yeah.
Well, I like something else you said, that, you know, about not staying in bad relationships. And I guess what I'm trying to say is, sometimes I wonder, you know, when we have a high divorce rate, or marriages don't last as long, as that good or bad? Not that I'm against happy relationships and all that, but what do you think? I mean, is it a good or bad thing? Having done all this research and seeing people, I mean, are people, are they cutting it, jumping the gun too quick and getting a divorce, or are they just getting out of bad situations faster and not putting up with the crap that people might have in the past? Or
I think our generation particularly wants it to be perfect forever, and you know,
and it ain't going to be perfect.
It's not. I mean, they drilled this into our heads over and over again. We said, one couple here in Los Angeles, we said, you know, what are your 3 secrets to staying together happily? And they said, 1, commitment; 2, commitment; and then the third one's commitment. And then you can think of the rest. You can think of the rest, you know, but you have to start there with this understanding that, look, we're going to go through it all. You can trust me that I'm going to go through it all with you, and I want you to trust me.
Well, I'm thinking of a quote. I think I've said this before on the show, but there was a quote from Tolstoy. I forget if it was Anna Karenina or War and Peace, and he says something like, "Happiness in the key to happiness in marriage is that both parties have to be either really smart or really dumb."
There's research that supports that. There's research that supports that people that don't have the high degrees in college or universities, PhDs, masters, end up staying together longer.
That would explain why we're still bachelors, right? A little over analytical when it comes to relationships.
But you know, we also interviewed a lot of couples that were very honest. You know, you get to your 80s and there's no secrets anymore. They're just very blunt, very honest about the state of their relationship. And we interviewed a lot of couples that would say, you know, I would have divorced him. Could I have afforded it? Or I would have divorced him had either one of us wanted the kids, but neither one of us wanted the kids, so we stayed together, you know?
Right.
Like a lot of situations like that. So it was, you know, there are those cases where we all know they stayed together because society dictated that they should.
Yep.
Yeah.
But it was really the ones that you could see when they sat down, they had this amazing connection, were the ones that we really paid attention to, what they said about how they achieved that connection.
And it was important to meet those kind of couples too, not just the fairy tale stuff, not the ones that still had it, but also the ones that he's talking about here that, you know, shoot, man, I don't know why I'm in this marriage. We had some of these. Matt had some that he had to ask, you know, why didn't you get a divorce?
Yeah, in the interview we asked him.
It's really not good.
Yeah, in fact, you were going to suggest a divorce. Is that it? Did you know? Actually,
I don't know.
And so to put those to, you know, the juxtaposition of a happy couple and a not so happy couple, you know, what they do differently.
And, and then to find out that some of the couples that had the amazing connection 20 years before were the couple that I would have asked, how come you don't get a divorce?
Wow.
And to hear what they had to say about what rejuvenated. You know, there are a lot of couples that went through the empty nest. Their kids are gone. It's 20, 25 years, and they called it living singles, married singles.
Married singles, yeah.
We're married singles. We don't even know each other anymore.
Right.
And we're like passing, we're living our two distinct lives. And how cool it was to have them talk about the power of getting open and honest and vulnerable with one another and sitting down and having these talks. And that's really all it took for them to rekindle that connection.
Yeah.
What percentage were happy or were the fairy tales, and what percentage did you think, oh my God, are these people crazy? They should have been, I'm going to divorce them.
I don't know if we've come together with an agreement on this one yet.
Because we disagree on that, you know?
I'll find out who's the optimist and who's the pessimist.
Yeah, exactly.
It seems my standards were a little bit more picky, you know.
Okay, so we know that you saw a smaller percentage of happy people.
Yeah, we argue about this all the time, but you know, there was probably 10% of the couples that I said that's, you know, where I had this moment with his grandparents. So I said that's the marriage I gotta have.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, you know, I would have said like 30% are in the amazing category, and then 20% would be like great, good marriages, you know, and then maybe even smaller. The majority of marriages I saw were healthy, happy marriages, with the elite being like, oh my gosh, it's an unbelievable romance.
Yeah.
And from your sense, based on the friends and that sort of thing, what you see and hear around you, that I imagine that's different than our generation. That
what's that?
The happiness factor is it lower than that or not? Do you think it's the same percentage? They just
with other people married?
No, I think they truly cherish one another in this generation.
Oh.
You know,
I mean in our generation though.
Oh, in our
people
generation
today, that do you think those percentages are declining?
Well, you know, I think a lot of us in today's society want the other person to make us happy, and they
blame them if they
you
don't.
know, yeah. If you're not making me happy, then obviously I need to cut this relationship off and go find somebody who is going to make me happy.
I like the fact that I think you quoted several people who said something like it was important to be a complete person or still have your own life. It didn't mean giving up your life, or you can be around somebody too much. You know, everybody needs, you know, well, you hear this like with the movie stars and stuff. They're going to get married and they're going to give up their career and stay at home. And I think, wow, that's the best recipe for divorce that I've ever heard in my life, because everybody has to have activities and interests.
Sure.
And,
yeah.
you know.
They weren't like, you know, you have to spend 24 hours a day with one another. They had their own lives. And in fact, when they did go and do these activities that they enjoyed, they brought that passion back to one another at the end of the day, and it was great.
Yeah, the friendship factor was huge that they talked about being. This husband, this marriage master was telling us a story that he came to his father and said, hey, Dad, I'm getting married. I love this girl. And his dad stopped him right there and said, you love her, but you like her. And how important it is to like somebody and want to have common interests and common values and really build that friendship.
Sure.
How huge that is in a relationship.
Because 50 years down the road.
What are you going to be talking about exactly?
We will be right back with the authors of Project Everlasting. And we are back with Mathew Boggs and Jason Miller as authors of Project Everlasting. So Earlier you said about staying together for the kids, which I think at least in the previous generation you heard a lot about. What was their take on that, and what's your take on that, having heard what they said? Is that a good idea? I don't think people today stay together for the kids, and personally I don't believe that, because I think you said, you know, you had friends who they were just happy their parents got a divorce because it was an unhappy marriage.
Yeah.
And if they're at each other's throats, I mean, nobody wants to be in a household with parents who are fighting.
Yeah.
So what do you think? I mean, did they have any thoughts on that, and do you have any thoughts on that, staying together for the kids?
Well, I can tell you, it's funny you asked that, because last night I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, and her parents have been married 35 years, and she was saying that halfway from year 8 to 22, it was horrible. And she would tell her parents, why don't you guys just get a divorce? Yeah. And now it's a completely different marriage. They're so cute, so in love with each other, and it was what they shifted in their relationship. And so I asked her, I was like, well, are you glad that your parents stayed together? And she was like, absolutely. I'm so glad they stayed together.
So even the kids changed their mind.
Yeah, and I think it all depends on the relationship, you know, and how healthy it is. If it's abusive, if it's crazy, then it's going to be a healthier situation if the parents split up. Like my parents split up, and it's hard to know. I was so young, I was 14 at the time, and my perspective wasn't really on them. It was just engulfed in my own world, and so it was hard to know how unhappy they were. And they did a good job keeping me out of that aspect. So I don't know if I would have been happier if they stayed together or not, but what I can tell you is that I'm really grateful that both of them are happy in their lives now. And I'm really happy for them having that happiness, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And what about you?
I think honestly, you know, the children did save some of their marriages. And, you know, they have the perspective now, they have the ability now that they're, you know, they're still together to say, I'm glad they did, because there was much more beyond the children in the end that we needed to do life together. But yeah, honestly, there were quite a few that stayed for the kids' sake and found out that was a good decision.
But they did find it again. Well, again, it's just kind of, I guess it's a good thing to hear that it does come back.
Yeah.
So you interviewed hundreds of people all across the country.
Yeah.
You went, how many states did you go to? Do you know?
We went 25 cities.
25 cities,
and
okay.
probably drove through like 35 states.
Yeah.
And all different kinds of people, all different backgrounds, rich,
Yeah.
poor, everything in between.
Yeah, that was the funny part, because our first documentary film is it's all white couples, because it was all based on the West Coast. And we'd done the 5-week tour in my little car, and that was the whole objective, was to, you know, get around the country, interview some couples who have all these different walks of life. And we interviewed a couple that lost their home in Katrina, that's in the book, and really got to see a different side of life.
Because they had gotten to a certain comfort level and then basically lost it all. I mean, I guess they were insured, but certainly they lost all their worldly
No, the insurance didn't cover it, and they lost everything.
Well, you hear so much in the news about that,
Yeah. And that puts it into perspective in terms of what's important at the end of your life. You know, they were so grateful for still having each other and still having the family, even though, you know, all the physical possessions were gone. It puts it into perspective what matters at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
So all these people you met and talked to, was there anyone who stood out the most, or anything you remember the most? You know, the story, the experience, the moment that stood out for you?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a couple, Argel and Martha. She was from Mexico City, and he was in L.A., and she was engaged to another man, came up to L.A. to buy a trousseau. They went on a blind date with another couple. She didn't speak a word of English. He didn't speak any Spanish. And so they connected. He instantly fell in love with her through her, you know, she was boisterous and whatnot. After spending a week together, they're in La Jolla, and this is how he proposes to her. He draws on a napkin a chapel and a bride and a groom and points at him and her and says, like, let's get married.
Wow.
So she calls off her engagement and ends up marrying this guy. And they're so in love now. And that's a great point, that she wasn't in love with him in the beginning. She married him because she was told that American husbands are the best. That she'll go dancing every night.
She had this fantasy of
Hollywood.
Hollywood.
And so they really grew their love together and their relationship. And we just actually hung out with them not too long ago, and they are so amazing.
How many years? How many marriages?
I don't know exactly. It's above 50.
Above 50.
Yeah.
So didn't even speak the language.
And what's equally amazing is he showed us the drawing he drew. That thing looked like two little crocodiles and like some.
She should have been offended. He was
I saw the
space
church
alien.
because, you know, there's like a cross or something and some bells, but these little little creatures.
Like, you want to go on National Geographic with me? What are we talking about?
Well, this is Jason Miller and Mathew Boggs. The book is Project Everlasting, a documentary as well. Thanks everybody for watching. We'll see you next time.